I'm here. I'm just muted my video. I'm here. I'm just muted my video. Can you hear me? Is your audio connected? Can you hear me? I can't hear you. No, I can't hear you. On the bottom left where the microphone is, like if you pull that little arrow up, you can pull like the microphone settings. Like you might have a different microphone selected. I still can't hear you. Oops. There you go.
Oh, that works now.
That works. There you go. Very good.
I don't understand why it didn't work before, because I did the testing like it asked me to and it was working.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, as long as it works.
Yes. So is the Pittsburgh event still going on?
Yeah, I have it on my phone. So I turned it down because we were having trouble. There it is.
The order directed.
Now that I fooled around with it, it stopped. Oh, they're switching people.
My name is Paul Guggenheimer.
Can you hear that?
My father, Dr. James Guggenheimer, is a Holocaust survivor. He is a refugee from
Okay, I'll be right back.
Yugoslavia,
Okay.
came to the United States in 1939. He's now 84 years old and living here in Pittsburgh with my mother, Dr. Guggenheimer. The passage I'm going to read is called Starving Children. It's by William N. McKinney, Sergeant, 978th Combat Service of Supply, First Army. 2 little Jewish orphans clung to me for 2 days. I was 6'2", 19 years old. They were Paul and George, aged 4 and 6. They clung to my legs, followed me everywhere. Our outfit was stopped for these 2 days just outside of Buchenwald at Weimar. The camp had just been liberated. I noticed them eating from our garbage bin. I went to them, and after much effort, they explained to me how the Germans had made them watch as they killed their parents. I gave them my mess kit, and they were so hungry, they both began eating from the one mess kit. After much explaining, I got them to let one eat while I went to get a second mess kit for the other. I wanted to adopt them and bring them to America at the end of the war, but I was informed by the authorities that this would be impossible. Paul and George would be placed in an orphanage with the rest of the displaced children. I've tried to locate the 2 boys, but have never heard another word about them. Still, I often wonder, I know they're in their 50s now. I wonder if they found good homes, had decent meals, warm clothing, and mainly, love.
My name is Rabbi Jeremy Marquise. The Mourner's Kaddish is an ancient text originally written in Aramaic that describes the greatness of the divine. Though it does not directly use the language of mourning or death, it is a reminder of the abundance of peace and power in the text of all. As I recite the words of the Kaddish, I invite you, if you are able, to please rise and to say Amen. Yitkadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah. Ba'alma Dibra Pirtei Ve'amlis Malchutei. B'chayachon V'yomachon B'chayei B'chol Beit Yisrael Ba'agata U'zman Karim V'yimeru. Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah V'varach La'alam Omei Omaya. Yitbarach V'yishtabach Yitfa'ar Yitramam V'yitnaseh. V'yitadar V'yitaleh V'yithalal Shemei D'Kudsha Lehila min kol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechamata v'amiran v'alma v'yimeru. Amen. Yehei shlama rava min shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimeru. Amen. Osei shalom v'mromav huya asei shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimeru. Amen.
My name is James Luco Jr., and I'm greatly honored and humbled to be here. Thank you very much for joining us today and letting me share with you a few of my friends who are sadly no longer with us. This is my uncle who was killed in action in 1944, and he is the reason for my interest and dedication to this subject. In my pursuit to learn as much as possible about him, I interviewed over 300 World War II veterans over the last 4 decades, and I would like to introduce to you two of them.
The experiences of American liberators of the death camps was not an early focus of Holocaust study, but as the academic research of the Shoah progressed, the value of their initial assessments offered a perspective and insight that has too often been overlooked.
Just FYI, we are already live, so
That was shared
just so you know.
Okay.
from two men
I think we only have, there's only a handful of viewers, and I'm imagining it's me and
geographically separate camps. were
just
here-
FYI.
Whenever
I
whenever
realized
you
that
want
these
us to
men were
start.
highly trained and
Oh, we can wait. We'll wait until they're finished.
experienced a severe level of
I'm
conflict.
just muting myself, so.
Thank you.
But what they were subjected to at liberation disconnected them from the experience of other veterans. This is Staff Sergeant Paul Lawalski of Butler, Pennsylvania, who was a pathfinder in the 82nd Airborne Division and a death camp liberator. Sergeant Lawalski saw heavy combat in Africa, Sicily, at Antio, on D-Day, in Rhineland, and was seriously wounded in the Battle of the Bulge. But none of that prepared him for what he would experience in liberation. He described an entrance into the camp, and it was performed exactly how he was trained. Once he secured the perimeter, then he immediately began to search for enemy intelligence. He saw a building with the door slightly ajar. He tried to enter it. He was physically pounding on the door with all his body weight. He could not budge it at all. He gradually discovered that there were corpses stacked higher than the door frame on the other side. When he finally realized what he was witnessing, it made it even more unbelievable and more unforgettable for him. On May 2nd, 1945, the 82nd Airborne Division overran Buglin, a subcamp of the new and gone concentration camp. At its height, Buglin held over 5,000 inmates, many of whom were suffering from starvation and disease. The living conditions in the camp when the 82nd Airborne arrived were deplorable. They found over 1,000 inmates dead in the camp already. The experience of the liberation for the survivors was one of shock. Primo Levi explained that not one Jew truly believed that he would still be alive the next day. The words liberation and freedom have completely different meanings to the survivors, ones that we will never be able to comprehend. And this was the same to the liberators. There was no celebration or good ending, but just the conclusion to the physical and mental struggle for survival. The Americans had no idea, no warning of what they were discovering. They had no preparation or training for this. What if they had? Would it even matter? These American soldiers were experienced to train and kill. They were trained to see their friends wounded and killed, but there was nothing to prepare them for this. Surviving explained that the Americans could not understand nor believe what they were looking upon her liberation. Ephraim Karemba felt that the Americans were frightened by what they found because none of it was describable. Captain Vinny Vicari was the artillery officer of the 101st Airborne Division and had been through all the division combat action from D-Day to the conclusion of the war. His unit liberated the sub-camp Offering 7. Several of his fingers and toes still exhibited frostbite damage as a further reminder in the 1990s.
Hi.
So silence was disturbing to him.
Excellent. Hello.
Leanne?
Yep.
Hi. Question. On my iPad, if I hit the Zoom button and just input the ID number, will that take me to you? Because I need
You're-
my phone.
Oh, yeah, it should.
So okay, so I don't need to hit the email. Doesn't have anything to do with it. It's really the ID code.
It's the ID, yeah.
Okay. All right.
He described it to me, broke away.
Thank you.
Looking for revenge, this is justice. These men were both in command because this is the day that I introduced these two heroes. Honest, God played their role for very proud. Some of the soldiers were some of the greatest that bond with one another. And afterwards, I would receive many late night phone calls when Mr. Ramos was sick. Others just went young. America's elite warriors, to the spear, broke away. At the same time, they were caring gentlemen, sincere patriots. This is one of my favorite pictures because this is the day that I introduced these two heroes to one another. They are true gentlemen, modest, downplaying their roles, but very proud of their service and their units. They had an instant bond with one another, and afterwards I would receive many late night phone calls.
For those watching on YouTube, we are just waiting for the Pittsburgh event to wrap up and then we'll get started.
Tip of the spear, the finest of their kind. But at the same time, they were caring gentlemen, sincere patriots that expected nothing for their service. I was very fortunate to learn their combat maneuvers in action, how they lost men, both suffering serious wounds and inflicting a level of violence on the enemy that you and I could never imagine. However, there was one thing that brought them to tears. That when they were described the day of liberation. But beyond that, the only time they demonstrated visible and immediate anger was when they faced the subject of Holocaust denial. Neither of these men would tolerate the implication. I could feel their pain and rage instantaneously upon any inference of the doubt of what they went through. They would be very proud of knowing what we are doing here today because it's so very important that we never forget. Never again. I light this candle in remembrance of all the Allied liberators and their families, and all who have perished in the
My name is Debbie Stuber, and I'll be reading remarks from Yad Vashem, a Holocaust museum in Israel. In a world of total moral collapse, there was a small minority who mustered extraordinary courage to uphold human values. These were the righteous among the nations. They stand in stark contrast to the mainstream of indifference and hostility that prevailed during the Holocaust. Contrary to the general trend, these rescuers regarded the Jews as fellow human beings.
We are already live, just FYI.
There were different degrees of help. Some people gave food to Jews, thrusting an apple into their pocket or leaving food where they would pass on their way to work. Others directed Jews to people who could help them. Some sheltered Jews for one night and told them apples in the morning. The main forms of help extended by the righteous among the shelters. Some people gave food to Jews, thrusting an apple into their pocket or leaving food where they would pass on their way to work. Others directed Jews to people who could help them. The main forms of help extended by the righteous.
Are you guys seeing my chat messages?
No, I'm not.
We are live and we do have about 14 people watching so far. So if one of you wants to vamp, feel free.
Okay, now I have the chat set up now.
Are you guys seeing my chat messages?
You should test it.
We'll begin when the service in Pittsburgh concludes, when we have the signal.
Joseph, can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
and I see from the chat that there are 14 people watching.
Well, I'm sure there'll be more joining.
No? How much longer will the service go?
Bonnie said to go ahead and get started.
Okay. We welcome all those who are joining us for this Yom Hashoah commemoration as we follow the program of the Pittsburgh Holocaust Center. We're not in our usual place at the courthouse today. We're one of the few communities where Yom Hashoah is publicly acknowledged with a gathering at the Mahoning Valley Courthouse. And there we would normally acknowledge all the students who submitted artwork, writing, or multimedia presentations regarding our theme, the 75th commemoration of the Auschwitz liberation. Our community with the JCRC and educators do a fantastic job in connecting with new generations in order that they can learn from the lessons of the Shoah and offer their own thoughts and creativity to help others do the same. And so today we announce the winners of the contest. In poetry, grades 7 and 8, Jocelyn Del Signore, Boulder Local Schools. Grade 9 and 10 poetry, first place, Zahara Laver, Western Reserve High School. Grades 9 and 10 poetry, second place, Tanya Kai Dangat, Canfield High School. 9 and 10 grades poetry, honorable mention, Willie Tewksbury, Sebring McKinley High School. Grades 11 and 12 poetry, first place, Grace Weiser, Boardman High School. Grades 11 and 12, grade poetry, second place, Marissa Scott, United Local Schools. Grades 7 and 8, essay, first place, Robert Loftus, Lowellville Schools. Grades 9 and 10 essay, first place, Lance Yo, Ursuline High School. Grades 9 and 10 essay, second place, Jocelyn Zhao, Canfield High School. And I truly apologize for any names that I mispronounce. Rabbi Beller will continue with the list.
Continuing on with grades 9, 10 essay, honorable mention, Jonathan Berdovich from East Palestine High School. 11th, 12th grade essay, first place, Grace Weiser, Boardman High School. 11th to 12th grade essay, second place, Caitlin McTrusty, East Palestine High School. 11th to 12th grade essay, honorable mention, Guy Tepsick, Boardman High School. In the category of art, first place in 9th to 10th grade, Madison Huziak, Western Reserve High School. 9th to 10th grade, second place, Elizabeth Fasemeyer, Canfield High School. 9th to 10th grade art, honorable mention, Brianna Norman, Western Reserve High School. 9th to 10th grade media, first place, Sophia Alleman from Ursuline High School. And 9th to 10th grade media, second place, Noah Little from Ursuline High School. I'd like to make a few comments in commemoration of the 75th anniversary of the liberation of the camps. Perhaps you've seen it on Amazon, a new show that premiered 2 months ago called Hunters. It's about a feisty group of vigilantes who discover hundreds of former high-ranking Nazi officials in 1977 New York City, conspiring to create a Fourth Reich in the United States. The Hunters set out to bring the Nazis to justice and thwart their genocidal plans. The leader of the group, Meyer Offerman, played by Al Pacino, offers us an insight into the Jewish psyche when he tells the youngest and newest recruit, Jonah Heidelbaum, played by Logan Lerman, the greatest single gift of the Jewish people is our capacity to remember. And it's because of our memory that we have survived. He continues, the Talmud says that living well is the best revenge. That is not true. The best revenge, Al Pacino's character says, is revenge. Now, I really must say that we Jews cannot agree with that last statement. It is not revenge that we seek, not at all. And I really have to object to the show for that reason, because I don't want anyone thinking that Jews are out for revenge for the atrocities committed during the Holocaust. No, what it is that we seek is not revenge. That has never been the case. Rather than revenge, I'll just use the word response. The best response is not living well, although that is our hope for every Holocaust survivor and their descendants. The best response is to never forget, to never forget. Because if we do forget, the Holocaust will happen again, whether it's to the Jews or another people. The world must never forget. I dread the day when there will be no more Holocaust survivors left to tell their story. All we will have is their written or taped testimonies. But that's not entirely true, because we will have something else. And that is the commitment of succeeding generations, particularly second generation survivors, of which I am one, since my mother, Inga, left Berlin in 1938 at the age of 13 on the Kinder transport. And we will continue to tell their story, to continue to tell the truth, so that the world will not allow another Holocaust to ever happen again. We can never forget how the world has treated us from the time of our slavery in Egypt right up until the present day. It seems like the world's oldest hatred, anti-Semitism, never goes away. I'm sure you heard about the story within the story of the protests that took place on the grounds of our state capitol this past weekend. It was during the protests to reopen Ohio so people can return to work when a few right-wing white supremacists held up some very disgusting and disturbing signs showing a Jew depicted as a rat with an elongated nose and sharp teeth with the words, "the real plague." You know, it's pathetic. The world could be coming to an end, and the anti-Semites will still find a way to blame the Jews. Unfortunately, we always have to be vigilant. We can never let our guard down, and we can never tire of our responsibility to make sure the world understands that there is no place for hate. The very yarmulke that I'm wearing now was created in the aftermath of the worst anti-Semitic incident in American Jewish history, namely the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting, which took place nearly a year and a half ago. And let us remember that we are only 6 days away from 1 year after the tragic shooting at the synagogue in San Diego. Will it ever stop? And what can we do to stop it? The best answer, in my opinion, is not revenge, nor is it self-pity, but through awareness education. At about the same time that I was jarred from my Shabbat rest after reading about the anti-Semitic incident in Columbus, I came across a moving story in the news which touched me very deeply, and I think it will move you in a similar manner. It was an article from the Washington Post dated April 17th. It's about Margit Buchhalter-Feldman, a Holocaust survivor who died from COVID-19 75 years after she was liberated from Auschwitz. She miraculously avoided death multiple times in 4 different camps, moving to the United States after the war to start a new life in New Jersey. Years later, she turned to teaching young people about the millions who died during the atrocities of the Holocaust. And she said, it is important for us to remember that 6 million of my fellow Jews were slaughtered, 1.5 million children. I am here, and I firmly believe it is because God wanted me to survive and be here to tell the free world what our uncaring world did to its fellow human beings. Well, here's a very heroic woman who has dedicated her life to teaching and educating children about the Holocaust. She was 90 and actually passed away last Tuesday, 1 day before the 75th anniversary of her liberation, but not without leaving us an incredible legacy of hope and light despite the utter despair and darkness she experienced. She described seeing piles of bodies, seeing worms squirming around in her soup that was barely edible, the barracks filled with straw containing human excrement and vomit. She was instrumental in forming the New Jersey State Holocaust Education Committee. Her son Joseph is a doctor working on the front lines of the pandemic in New Jersey, and sadly, her husband Harvey remains hospitalized with the virus. So Margit was just an extraordinary human being. You know, to have lived through all the death that she witnessed and the suffering she endured, yet not to become vengeful, but to be grateful for life, to see the promise of tomorrow. Her life is a true testimony as to the power of the Spirit. She reminds me so much of Bill Vey, so dear, a member of our community who was so kind, giving, compassionate, and one of the sweetest people that I knew, despite having dodged death probably a dozen times, surviving the camps. And he dedicated his life to teaching teachers, students, all those he could in our local area about the Holocaust. So on the 75th anniversary of the liberation of the death camps, let us remember those valiant fighters who struggled to teach the world about the horrors of the Holocaust. And let us dedicate ourselves to carry on the work of true women and men of valor, and so many who dedicated themselves to teaching the world as we dedicate ourselves to making sure the world never forgets.
Every Yom Hashoah, and whenever I think of my parents, my relatives, the extended community of survivors, those who I grew up with and those who I come to know, I'm truly humbled, filled with awe, and very much choked up. Therefore, at such occasions as today, I always pray that their spirit will help me find words to do justice to their experience and the lessons they want the world to remember. When I was a student in New York for 8-some years, every now and then I would be called to the hospital in Marshall Parkway in the Bronx to translate for my grandfather's sister-in-law, because she was traumatized in the Shoah. And therefore, although she was always a kind, loving person, when paranoia would take over, she sometimes disappeared in the streets and wound up in the hospital. And I would go and help translate in Hungarian for the doctors. She told me that she had a very fine family and a fine life, blessed in so many ways. But when she was in the cattle car on her way to Auschwitz, something inside her snapped, and she was never the same again. Amazingly, she always kept that loving nature and motivation with her, no matter how life was outwardly. And so I always remember a lesson that my father told me, an aphorism: from broken fragments of my heart will I build an altar. And these are the foundations of my life. And I connected it to a part of Psalms 20, Yishlach Ezraka Mikodesh. God sends your help from a holy place. These broken fragments of the heart are sacred. The words resonated with me as they did for my father, my parents, and so many other survivors. There were many fragments of their shattered hearts that linked past and present, welding sadness with joy so strongly that these could not be separated. Never could there be consciousness of one without the other, never joy without some level of sadness, never celebration without tears or tears without joy. From the broken fragments of heart and life, my parents, like all survivors, invested their hope in creating family. My parents and many others worked hard to rebuild not only their lives, but lovingly the lives of others. They worked to build a national homeland and prayed for a world in which we could live without apology or persecution. We are still trying to realize the dream of our parents and their generation. A place where living as Jews requires no explanation or justification, just to exist as dignified human beings would we call mention. Where indeed every person, Jew and non-Jew, is recognized as a sacred creation of God. I'm awed by survivors because how could they find the strength to rebuild life positively, suffering so much from that fusion of pain and joy? And my experience and their words to me taught me it is because they were able to keep in mind purpose, caring, love for people, and always through that, a hope for a special future, if not for themselves, then for others. Every day, my father said, he recited the Shehechianu after liberation. The Shehechianu is a prayer, a blessing that we say when we have something positive to experience in our life. And he said the Shehechianu because he said every day after liberation was a day he thought he would never have. Imagine if we could all, no matter what our past experience, appreciate the holiness of life in that way. Live without attributing negativity to others. Find the evil in the world, not by stereotypes or negative attributions of one organization or another, but know that, as our tradition reminds us, we each have the potential for inclinations to good and bad. What makes the difference? My father taught me the difference is the neshama. We are now fighting an invisible enemy in the coronavirus, but we also have an invisible divine force within our neshama, our soul. It is the special heart, divine heart, that helps us to keep going and find help no matter what happens. And it reminds us of how important we each are for each other. While each person's experience is unique and distinctly their own, our tradition urges us to learn from and honor the presence of every precious soul in the neshama by continuing to live with purpose even when it feels too hard. It reminds us to help ourselves and others to find that holiness that's within, that invisible force of divinity to overcome the evils of the world that threaten us outside and inside, physically and spiritually. It is so important for us. And now that we're living in a way that's separate from one another, it's so important to appreciate the holiness that brings us together, whether through virtual connections or when we are more fortunate, being able to be close together in love and being able to embrace each other. It's so important to remember our purpose. The Hasidic Rebbe Nachman of Wroclaw, Zichron Tzadik Livracha, was the great-grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, who helped many people with insights and guidance. He still has many followers and others who seek out his wisdom and stories for insight. Before Rosh Hashanah in 1808, a follower of Rab Nachman presented him with a magnificently handcrafted chair. Every day for 6 months, the shochet, the slaughter of Teplik, he was a kosher butcher, devotedly carved a magnificent creation whose hand-carved images amazingly capture visions, dreams, and stories of the Rebbe. It seemed a sacred work, that chair. The Rebbe Zichron Tzadik Livracha died 2 years after he was presented with that chair. But that chair remains a palpable link to that memory. In 1920s, facing great violence from the world, the Breslover Hasidim were compelled to resolve how they could preserve that chair without losing it to destruction. They decided to dismantle it into pieces in hopes that one day they and their descendants would be able to reassemble the chair in Jerusalem. Miraculously, the pieces were successfully taken to Jerusalem in 1936, restored finally in 1959, and in 1984 we finished and restored to its rightful place at the Breslov Synagogue Center in Mea Shearim in Jerusalem, for all to see and to find inspiration. Friends, today that we and so many others feel the brokenness in life from invisible and physical threats and dangers. That lesson from the Breslov Hasidim is to understand that we are each like the dismantled pieces of that chair, fulfilling sacred purpose in a broken world, waiting until the world is properly put together. Keep faith, like my parents and relatives and other survivors. Today we feel separated in a troubled world, facing unknowns. But we pray and do not give up, that life will have meaning. And someday, we and this world will understandably be whole. May we therefore help each other, with God's help, to grow, to be healthy, to be whole, to realize purpose, to encourage for ourselves and others a good to neshama, and through the force of that goodness, that neshama within us, may we all, irrespective of affiliation, background, or any differences that may exist, be united to make a better world. May we all stay safe and healthy and work together to fulfill the dreams of those who perished and those who survived the Shoah, so that the world can move forward in tribute and honor to them with love. I wish everyone sei gesund, as they would wish, health and safety to all, and please God, a world in which there is healing and finally wholeness to all. Amen.